So it's not just a federal question. It sounded like people locally did not want to spend the money. And I think that there is...
That was really the Biden setup. That was not our setup.
This crazy bee thinks what, a sorcerer is controlling the weather? Harry Potter? Dumbledore?
President Trump is right about one thing, and that is there is a bureaucracy to FEMA. There is a bureaucracy. So I'm one of those, my philosophy, streamline it, reforming it. I agree with President Trump and with you also, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Everyone here, if we could have warned them, we would have done so. And we didn't even have a warning.
Hello, everybody. Guys, let's get right into this segment. I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to piss you off. There was no pushback and placing blame exactly where it belongs with this whole flood disaster. And check out what a couple of Republicans are saying. Truly unbelievable. Check this out and we'll talk about it.
Washington, let's get right to the breaking news tonight. The true devastation of the floods in central Texas is slowly coming into focus. At least 104 people have died. As search and rescue operations continue, the area is expected to get some relief from the severe weather, with lingering storms expected to wind down by tonight. But that doesn't mean that the flood warnings are over. It has complicated the ongoing efforts by more than 20 state agencies desperately searching for any survivors. That includes some children at the all-girls Christian summer camp, Camp Mystic. 27 campers and counselors have died, but 11 are still unaccounted for.
I've lost near friends, best friends, my bus, my godchildren, my house, my car, you know, all those materialistic things, but it's those people that still haven't been found. Some of them, just praying for their recovery.
Senator Ted Cruz's daughters have attended similar camps in the area, and he says the state has learned some important lessons over the last few years.
If we could go back and do it again, we would evacuate particularly those in the most vulnerable areas, the young children in the cabins closest to the water. We would remove them and get them to higher ground if we could go back and do it again.
I'm surprised that asshole's not in Cancun running away from another disaster in the state.
One of the questions still unanswered is why officials didn't call for those evacuations earlier. The Caryville city manager says that one reason was out of fear of, quote, crying wolf. The city's mayor says that he never received a warning for torrential rainfall. The first emergency alerts for that area went out around 1:14 a.m. on Friday, and 2 flash flooding warnings came over the next couple of hours when most people in the area, including those campers, were fast asleep. By 4:45 a.m., the Guadalupe River had overflowed, reaching heights of more than 23 feet.
Everyone here, if we could have warned them, we would have done so. And we didn't even have a warning.
We get alerts on floods fairly often because of the terrain here.
And did you get an alert on your phone in those overnight hours?
I did not.
Does that concern you?
Yes.
There's no question that all of those people, as he just said, if they could have done anything to prevent this, they would have. But there is the question, Congressman, you represent the state of Texas, and there is a really important question right now about whether there is and was a need for more preparedness for this type of scenario. Warnings, alarms, things that don't rely on whether your cell phone is on or whether you have cell phone service or not. You know, the New York Times had a piece about this. We're talking about a May budget meeting where county commissioners were discussing flood warnings that were being developed by a regional agency as something that they might be able to make use of. But in a recent interview, Rob Kelly, the Kerr County judge and its most senior elected official, said local residents had been resistant to new spending. Taxpayers won't pay for it, he said, adding that he didn't know if people might reconsider now. Is this a time to reconsider?
Well, first of all, we got to first think about the families and the first responders that are doing their best under those very difficult situations. You know, my daughters some years ago went to a camp close by, Camp Longhorn, so I'm very familiar with that area. In fact, I spent about 5 years of my life playing six-man football in that area, about an hour away, so I'm very familiar with the terrain. It's a beautiful...
Dude, who is this idiot? I don't care about your six-man football. I want to be clear about something. This was Trump and the Republicans' fault, and that MAGA county's fault. They gutted these agencies, like the National Weather Service, NOAA, constantly attacking anything science, climate related. All for what? What was it again? What was these cuts for? Oh, tax cuts for the rich. Very good. Got to make sure the rich get a few more dollars instead of these poor little kids' lives being alive right now. Right, Republicans? And I can tell you something, as someone on the left and Hispanic, that many of you Republicans would like to be fed to alligators and think we're subhuman. I don't want you losing your lives, or those poor kids that are innocent as can be. MAGA County, Trump County, or not. That's called humanity, being human. You should try and learn it. Because let's just be real, if this was the other way around, Republicans would be making fun of it, pointing fingers, making just the stupidest conspiracy theories that we wanted to do this. This is what they always do. Actually, speaking about that, let's see what a couple Republicans are saying, instead of the stupid little thoughts and prayers like these assholes always do in situations like this. You really won't believe how sick they are. Check this out. So let me read to you what this idiot Marjorie Taylor Greene says. Truly a sociopath. I'm introducing a bill that prohibits the injection, release, and dispersion of chemicals or substances into the atmosphere for the express purpose of altering weather, temperature, climate, or sunlight intensity. It will be a felony offense. I have been researching weather modification, and working with the Legislative Council for months writing this bill. We must end the dangerous and deadly practice of weather modification and engineering. This crazy bee thinks what, a sorcerer is controlling the weather? Harry Potter? Dumbledore? Like, Republicans are willing to place the blame literally on anything but themselves. Anything or against the things that they believe in. They don't want to believe in things like climate change and that weather patterns are changing. So what, you blame it on Harry Potter? This is what happens when you have a party that attacks and despises education and science. And the voters eat it up like the little baby birds they are, always being fed what to believe. They aren't able to think for themselves and have simple logic and come up with a conclusion that makes sense. What's more disturbing than this idiot's post, look at that heart in the bottom, 119,000 essentially likes. There's 119,000 people that saw this post and thought, yeah, this makes sense as to what's happening right now. Like, unbelievable. I don't know how you cure that. I don't know how you fix that. These people are not living in reality. Check out what Trump said about this whole thing. Again, unbelievable.
Tell you, if you look at that, what a situation that all is, and that was really the Biden setup. That was not our setup, but I wouldn't blame Biden for it either. I would just say this is a 100-year catastrophe, and it's just so horrible to watch.
Diablo, really? It was Biden's fault? He said, well, I wouldn't really blame it on Biden. Then why the F did you even bring it up? You're obviously blaming him. And like, this is what happens when you're in a cult. No one's going to, like, his voters, they're going to just eat it up like baby birds. They aren't able to think for themselves and have simple logic and come up with a conclusion that makes sense. They hear Biden's fault. Oh, yep, it has to be. It's half the country, damn near half the country doesn't believe in basic science, guys. I don't know how you fix that.
Beautiful. The hill country in Texas is a beautiful area, but it can be difficult because, look, I was there just in that area a year ago, and I spent a lot of time there. Cell phones are hard to work in those areas, especially you got those hills or those mountains, you know, depending on your perspective. Wi-Fi is very difficult. So first of all, you know, you got to look at some of the very, very difficult situations because of the terrain that we have there. Second of all, look, we'll have a lot of time later to see what happened. There'll be an investigation into that. What did the National Service provide? What warnings? You know, they did have in the San Angelo, San Antonio area about 6 people vacant positions that were not filled. We got to look at some legislation. I saw some of my former colleagues or some of the people in the state legislature, they were going to consider a bill They didn't consider it during the regular session, so I assume they're going to put it in this special session. And then, of course, you got to look at the local government. You know, sometimes that area is a very conservative area. I'm very familiar with Kerrville, Texas, in that area, very conservative. And some of the people didn't want to spend any money. I understand that, but budgets are priorities, and lives should be one of them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues at hand here. I mean, and speaking of, it's not just the localities, which are very important because they kind of control what happens in their little area, but at the federal level, you have the Trump administration saying for most of the time that they've been in power that they want to eliminate FEMA as an agency. President Trump has said it. Ted Cruz, the senator, has said it. Let's just play some of what Trump has said over the last few months.
I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away. FEMA has been a very big disappointment. They cost a tremendous amount of money. It's very bureaucratic, and it's very slow.
We want to wean off of FEMA, and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states. So the governors can handle it. That's why they're governors now. If they can't handle it, they shouldn't be governor. But the FEMA thing has not been a very successful experiment. Very, very expensive, and it doesn't get the job done.
Are you still planning to phase out FEMA?
Well, FEMA is something we can talk about later. But right now, they're busy working, so we'll leave it at that.
Isn't the
FEMA is so expensive. How about those tax cuts for the rich? Was that expensive? And he says he's bringing back education to the states. If you don't know, whenever Republicans say we're pushing it back to the states like education, that means they're gutting it. That means that it's essentially done for. Education is going to sink even further in red states, which is already horrendous, if you can't already tell by the average Republican voter.
This just more proof that FEMA is needed. They are working, as he just said.
First off, I don't think I can't start talking about this without talking about how much we're praying for the 10 or 12 families who are still waiting on news of their child in Central Texas. Those of us who've been camp parents know that you have a lot of trepidation when you hand your kid over to strangers, and camp's a wonderful experience for kids, but every parent's been scared when they did it. FEMA comes in after a disaster. FEMA comes in and aids the state and local officials after a disaster has happened. It's not about disaster preparedness. And disasters in this country are handled by the states and handled by the localities. FEMA mainly serves as a funding source and a lot of red tape between the taxpayers and those localities. It's a fair question to say whether we need to get rid of FEMA or not, because the states could make better use of the money that FEMA is currently soaking up in Washington.
There is a disaster preparedness role to FEMA. And I mean, you're right that they are there in the moments after something happens, but one of the jobs of federal agencies is, as a force multiplier, they also are able to see more than what local officials are able to see and help coordinate.
Talk to state emergency management officials. They'll tell you that FEMA's usually in the way. That everybody who's worked in the hurricane belt knows that. The expertise is at the state level for this. No one's saying the federal government shouldn't help in disasters. No one's saying they shouldn't be of assistance. The question is whether that money's best used with the bureaucracy in Washington or in a state and local area. I also want to go back and talk about evacuations. Senator Cruz is right. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Everybody would evacuate if we knew now. One thing that happens in these situations when you're a local official trying to decide about evacuating is you have to decide about nursing homes. Kerrville has about 5 nursing homes. And when you evacuate a nursing home, almost always someone dies. So you only issue an evacuation because they can't stand the move. So you only issue the evacuation order when you are certain you must do it. I think maybe in the middle of the night on July 4th, there were probably not enough people there to collaborate to decide, is this the right call in the middle of the night on July 4th? And I'm sure the local officials did everything they could. Obviously, they didn't make the call they'd make if they could do it again.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brad, in terms of my sympathy goes out to the area. I said this earlier. It might be a conservative area, but that water did not discriminate whether you were a Democrat or Republican. It was a natural disaster. I do think, though, we have to look at the totality of circumstances. I think there's been questions about the National Weather Service. I think, FEMA did get impacted by DOGE, but FEMA also has $646 million that is now going to be cut. The thing about this is a tragedy. And if anyone could have done anything different, they would have. But also, it's not just a federal question. It sounded like people locally did not want to spend the money. And I think that there is this stigma about using government money for anything with conservatives, that we should just have a more honest conversation. And if an elected official could go back and say, you know what, I can make the convincing argument to a taxpayer about why we need to spend this. This is good use of government funding, and it's not just wasteful spending or fraud and abuse, but this will save people's lives. I hope that other communities take heed to that. I also think, though, that in disasters, when cameras turn away from this area, there will be devastation that they will need the federal government still to be available, and FEMA plays a long role. It will take years for people to really rebuild, if they ever can ever really totally rebuild. So are any federal government agencies perfect? No. But are they needed for moments like this? I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, if your point of...
And she said, which I don't agree with, if anyone could have done anything different, they would have. I just don't believe that. I think Republicans know they don't want government intervention at all. They want these people to be drones. Believe in Republicans and God, and that's it. Like, this is what it pisses me off about this panel, because it's almost like they don't want to point the blame at what's really going on here. That the Republican Party has infected the mind of the voters. That all of government is bad and all of science is not to be believed, and getting an education is useless. Colleges are being controlled by liberals and Jewish people. Science is fake. Just believe in Republicans and God. That's the problem here, guys.
About the philosophy around spending money and when it's appropriate and when it's not, for the localities, but also for the whole country, that's a big question right now. I mean, the doge of it all was essentially all the things that the federal government is spending money on for the most part is waste and fraud. But clearly, there are some things where spending money saves lives. And it may not save lives in the moment that you spend it, but at some point, somebody's life, somebody's child could have been saved.
Well, I think something that gets lost in this is the Doge cuts have actually not taken effect. They don't take effect until October 1st. And if you talk to the National Weather Service, they say we had 5 staffers instead of the normal 2 that were on hand. We were giving alerts on Thursday warning about this. You talked to the union head of the National Weather Service staffers and said, yeah, we did every single thing we could possibly do. And you're right, it did go back to the localities, but that's where the money goes, and it's up to a local municipality or town to say, hey, yeah, we can afford this or we can't afford this. They put in for a federal grant, they didn't get it. And I mean, it's a terrible situation, but I do think the National Weather Service followed through on everything that they were supposed to do based off of all the current reporting.
Yeah, and that's right. I think on Thursday night, they did send.
They put in for a federal grant and didn't get it. That is the part of the problem. Why didn't they get it? Because Republicans don't believe in stuff like this. Trump and this new, not even new, they've always been like this. They don't believe in that stuff, so they rejected them.
Out the notices
yeah.
On it, but what happened on the ground, that's something different. But you're right about that, about the notices going out on Thursday on that. Look, I sit on appropriations, and one of the committees I sit on is Homeland Security, which has FEMA, so I've been dealing with FEMA. President Trump is right about one thing, and that is there is a bureaucracy to FEMA. There is a bureaucracy. So I'm one of those. My philosophy is, do we need to streamline? Do we need to reform FEMA? Absolutely. But there are certain times in our country where there's a situation that the federal government has to come in and coordinate, and FEMA can do that only if they get reformed, only if they get streamlined, because it has become bureaucratic. I can tell you that because I sit on that committee, and there's been times where we're trying to get some things and it was just bouncing from one place to the other place. So streamline it, reforming it. I agree with President Trump and with you also, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most people who are on the receiving end of disaster relief can tell you it's nothing but bureaucracy sometimes. But the question is, should the agency exist?
Yes.
I think that's the question that the Trump administration, the Trump administration has put that on the table.
Well,
so that's why we
it
are
doesn't have
having
to
a
exist
conversation.
in the shell that is the current agency. There will be a federal role for disaster, but sometimes agencies are so rotten you have to start over.
All right, up next for us.
And what was that Hispanic dude talking about? Henry, I don't even know his last name. Like, he talks about how much Trump was right, like 3 times in this. Like, unbelievable. Do you not? It's almost like they didn't want to place the blame where it clearly is. It's this whole part in this ideology. And when something bad like this happens, thoughts and prayers. Just like when kids get gunned down in schools. It's my belief Republicans just don't care if children die. It's just a fact to me. We've seen this time and time again. It doesn't matter if they get flooded. It doesn't matter if they get gunned down by a psychopath. This disaster flood will change nothing. How Republicans approach these things, how the voters think about it. Like I said, the voters are brainless. They're lemmings. The majority of these Republican voters, whatever Trump says, is God's word. I mean, you saw what Marjorie Taylor Greene said. She's blaming this on wizardry, on sorcery. I don't know what the F she's talking about. She's completely effed in the head. 120,000 people liked her post. What do you like? Who do you think we're dealing with here? These people are not in a lot. Half the country doesn't believe in basic logic. It's the nicest way I can say it. I'm gonna leave it there, guys. This panel was really frustrating. They weren't placing the blame on this ideology. But anyways, let me know what you think about all this in the comments. Please leave a like, subscribe. It really helps the channel. Really helps get the message out there. And I'll catch you in the next one.